Hey there, it's Saturday, June 12th, maybe? 11th? 12th? One of the two. And Omar and I are going to make a trip to the museum today together. To see some art. Real art. You know, I hear all these people on talk shows and stuff talking about going to see Beyonce and how Beyonce has this tour going on, and I don't understand people. That woman doesn't write her music, and she's lip singing up there. So it's like, why would you pay all that money to go see somebody lip sing to some music they didn't even write? If you want to see a good show like that, go see a drag show at Asia SF. I mean, come on. And meanwhile, people doing original art, making original art. Yeah, like me. I tell you, that's what's wrong with the United States. That's what's wrong with America. People are willing to pay top dollar to go see a knockoff, but they're not willing to pay a penny for an original. They want it for free. It's gross. Really, really gross. Seriously, they put on a really good show at Asia SF. I've been a couple times, and the food's good too. So, I mean, if that's your thing, watching somebody all dressed up, looking good, lip singing to something they didn't write, well, go see a good entertaining show like that. Anyway, Miss Kitty Pants has been irritated with me. She and I have had words in over the past couple days. Miss Kitty Pants is getting up in age. And she has been peeing on the floor. And she's been doing this so frequently that we have gotten the pee pads, you know, like you can get for house training dogs. You put them by the door. That way, if you don't get there in time, the dog piddles on the pad, and it's basically a diaper for the floor. And I've been suspecting that Miss Kitty Pants was just being lazy, and not all of it. She's getting old and she's not well. So, but she'd been getting pretty demanding and pushy, and Miss Kitty Pants has always had an attitude. And I just had it. And I yelled at her. I said, "Fuck you, Miss Kitty Pants." And she was like, I said, "Yeah, that's what I said." Well, we didn't have any pee on the floor all day that day. That evening, she did pee on one of the pee pads, but it was one of the ones. It's the one that's kind of removed. It's not near everybody. So she's starting to feel badly about being extraordinarily cantankerous when she only needs to be a little cantankerous. No, she's walking out of the room now. Trying to make up. She's mad at me. She wants me to say I'm sorry to her, but I want her to say I'm sorry for peeing all over everything, because I just, you know, on one hand, one hand it upsets me, because it's like, oh my goodness, Miss Kitty Pants might be gone at any minute, you know, because it's, you know, pets die. Anyway, let you know how the museum is. Hi there, it's Sunday, and yesterday Omar and I went
of Honor, to see the Egyptian antiquities exhibit and the general collection. And it's always interesting to see what a museum has in their general collection, what they spin out and what they show while other museums are showing other things, and it's always very, very cool. So the Egyptian exhibit is very well curated. It's in this room. It's gallery number 1, which is on the upstairs floor of the Legion of Honor, and the room itself is very it's very evocative of an Egyptian tomb. I've seen the pictures of Tut's chamber, and it's kind of square, and this room is very square, and they have the walls painted in a motif that is like an Egyptian hieroglyph kind of motif, and it kind of fades. It's tone on tone. It's ivory on gray, and it kind of fades into the background. And the room then is there's some things in the center, and then things displayed on the walls. And so the whole point of the exhibition is to draw a comparison between, or pull together, or highlight where modern technology and ancient technologies or ancient artifacts are crossing over, and they have used what was it CAT scans, did they say, or was it MRI scans? Anyway, they're doing these scans of mummies, and from that they were able to create a digital rendering of these skulls of the mummies that are on display, and then from that create a forensic bust, so you can actually see the faces of these people that are preserved in these sarcophagi. And then they have some artifacts and things that are there as well, including some jewelry and amulets, and the jars that they had. I think they had one jar. They had one canoptic jar, that's what they put the organs in, and put them into the tomb. So it's a very, very interesting exhibit. And here again we see science and technology and art working hand in hand, and historically that is always the case. Art is always the playground of science, or perhaps science is the playground of art. It's hard to tell, but those two definitely, they play well together, and one cannot exist without the other. I really recommend going and checking out this exhibition, and also seeing what's on display in the general collection. So the deYoung Museum, I went to the deYoung last week, and so the deYoung Museum and the Legion of Honor are sister organizations, and they share a lot of resources. And what's different besides the architecture of the building, we have the deYoung, I would say, it's a very modern building. Architecture is very, very modern, and then whereas the Legion of Honor is cross between American Jeffersonian and Corinthian, classical Greek kind of architecture. There's lots of pillars, and there's a big courtyard and a lot of marble. And the pieces that they show there are largely from the neoclassical and classical era, whereas at the deYoung, you have a lot of those things, as well as they have was it Mesozoic America? Well, anyway, the Americas, and so that's the way they have things separated out. And there's crossover in themes, and it's interesting to see how themes and what themes repeat themselves throughout art and throughout history. And currently, in the main exhibit that's at the deYoung, there's a painting in the feature gallery that is a artist interpretation of Susanna and the Elders, which is a scene from the Bible where there's this a young woman who is at the well or at the pond or whatever, and she's bathing, right? And two male elders from the community come upon her and they see her. And this is, of course, has nothing to do with her modesty or immodesty or indiscretion. This woman is bathing herself, and these two men voyeuristically come upon her. And when they see her, they decide that they're going to try to force themselves on her. And when she rebuffs them, they make up a story about how she's a trollop, right? And this happens. This is such a common thing. This is such a common thing, and this kind of thing happens even today. I mean, I can speak to that. I think that many women, most women, probably can. But they also have an image based on this scene on display at the Legion of Honor as well. And these two paintings they're by two different artists, and they're from two different periods. And the piece that is on display at the Legion of Honor predates the one that's on display at the deYoung. And it's interesting to see the two pieces. I have an image where I have the two pictures next to each other, so you can see the two paintings compared. And it looks as though the older painting, the one on display at the Legion of Honor, is happening in the moment of her being accosted by the men, and her expression is she's very covered up. Whereas the other painting, the other rendering is the one that's later, seems to be before this happened. So the men are further back in the background, and she's unaware, right? She's nude. So that's the biggest difference between these paintings. And in the more recent painting, the one at the deYoung, that painting is a nude, whereas in the painting at the Legion of Honor, she's very much naked. There's an awareness of being seen. But the gesture of the figure is the same in both. And when I'm talking about gesture, I'm talking about where it's placed in the composition and the overall shape of the figure. And I'm not talking about the body. I'm talking about how it's placed on the page or in the frame. And it's just very interesting to see this subject matter being repeated, and biblical subject matter is repeated over and over and over and over and over again throughout all of art history. And it'd be interesting to see this scene interpreted by contemporary artists, to see how that would change, or how the image would be different, or what would be reflected in modern culture and modern sensibilities. So you know, that's very interesting. And the other thing that I noticed at the Legion of Honor is somebody there has a great affinity for St. John the Baptist, because they're in almost every gallery, not all of them, but in almost every gallery, there's at least one depiction of the saint. There's a sculpture in particular that I found compelling, that it's a marble, it's either marble or alabaster, it might be alabaster actually, carving of John the Baptist's head on the platter. I mean, if you know your biblical history, the story is, you know, John the Baptist met his end when a powerful woman decided she wanted the head of St. John the Baptist. Bring me the head of John the Baptist. And that's what she got. And the carving anguish on his face, I mean, is really quite exquisite, quite exquisite, quite exquisite. So anyway, if you get a chance to go check it out, I recommend, I highly, highly recommend it, especially the Egyptian exhibit, because seeing the how they manufactured and fabricated this jewelry and ceramics and pottery and things, and to think about the tools that they were using in comparison to modern techniques and methods, it's really amazing. It's really amazing to see. We think we've come so far, but you know, I think it's a matter of convenience, really, when it comes down to it. But you know, art's a pretty amazing thing. Art's a pretty amazing thing. And I made a comment yesterday that, you know, I was going to go see some real art. Because I've been hearing people talk in mainstream media, you know, kind of talk show kinds of things. Everybody's talking about Beyonce and her whatever her tour is. And you know, I don't understand people paying all that money to go see somebody lip sing to music they didn't even write. You know, I mean, if you want to see an entertaining show with, you know, beautiful people lip singing and to music they didn't write, go catch a good drag show. I mean, Asia SF in San Francisco. Highly recommend them. I've been there twice. Omar and I have been there twice. They've got good food and they've got a good show. So, you know, why spend all that money on a Beyonce ticket when you could go have a nice meal and a good show, right? And it's, you know, I mean, why pay that much money for a knockoff, right? Save your pennies and buy an original. You know, I mean, really now. You know, and speaking of, you know, late night TV and talk shows and things, I've got to give a shout out to John Oliver. This past week, I saw he did something that was really quite touching. What he did, he did a segment talking about people who buy debt, right? The banking system. Right? It's very, very easy to buy debt. And, you know, he made this point by creating a business very easily, by making a website, and then he bought a whole bunch of, it was medical debt, people's medical debt. And it was like something like millions of dollars worth that he bought for, what was it, 6 cents on the dollar? I think he said something like that, which is like, wow. Anyway, millions of dollars of medical debt, and he bought it and he forgave it. So that means there's a whole bunch of people whose medical debt has been forgiven, and how incredible is that? So good for you, John Oliver. I hope you get lots of hugs. Mr. Colbert. He had Mr. Gary Johnson and his running mate on this week, which is like, wow, how cool is that to see a third-party candidate be able to speak. You know, Mr. Gary Johnson has been nominated as the Libertarian Party's candidate for President of the United States, and he's a governor, and so his running mate is also a governor, a seated governor right now, and they're very interesting guys, very, very interesting guys. And Gary Johnson coming out being all suave in his blazer and his blue jeans and his tennis shoes. Check you out, Mr. Gary Johnson. I was impressed, and he brought up a good point, you know, because in the show up until this point, Stephen had been speaking of the primary and of the presidential race as just having two parties, and that's simply not the case. There are many, many, many parties in the United States, and you know, say what you will about being upset about Donald Trump and not liking what your other choices are. Well, you have more than two choices. You do. You always have. You always have. It's just that now there's a real possibility of those third parties having some coverage, because that's what makes them viable, is having the clout of media coverage, so that people know what it is that they're standing for, what those candidates stand for. It's about having more options, right? So I was really excited to see Mr. Gary Johnson being all suave and debonair on Mr. Colbert, you know. I saw that Germany is kind of opening the door back up to the idea of Russia rejoining the G7 to reunite and become once again the G8. I don't know. Can an octopus grow its arm back? We'll see. Septopus, Septopus. We'll see now, won't we? It's interesting to see this reaching out to Russia, given the developments that we've seen in Turkey over the past couple weeks. I'd say 3 weeks actually. Developments we've seen in Turkey since the tragic loss of Egyptian Flight 804. And, you know, to the people of Turkey, I truly, truly hope that you are able to avoid civil war and to find peaceful resolution to the issues that you're facing. You know, all this stuff with Turkey and Syria and the stuff that's going on in Cyprus, and it's very interesting then to see the antiquities that are on display at museums. So in addition to the Egyptian show that's currently at the Legion of Honor, part of their general collection that they have on display downstairs includes ancient Greek relics, as well as a couple other Egyptians and some Syrian, some Etruscan and some ancient Syrian pieces. And they're small fragments of bas-relief that look like they could have come off of walls or possibly furniture, things that were carved. But they're for what you see in the size of some pieces, these are very small fragments that are extremely moving. And thinking about the country of Syria being fragmented, both literally and figuratively, right now, and then encountering the fragments of these artworks, it's really time gives space for pause and reflection. And I felt the same way about the Greek pieces as well. You know, the antiquities that have been taken from the Greek people throughout history. It's sad to see a culture plundered. And it speaks to the resilience and strength of Greek people and their own personal identity, their own cultural identity, that Greece has been able to remain as that the cultural identity of Greece has remained cohesive, even if the economics and politics have not. So there's not a resolution to this. It's just interesting to consider while encountering day-to-day life, as we are here. I hope that Russia will rejoin the G7 and come back to being at the G8. I think there's a lot to be shared and learned between all of the nations involved, and great opportunity for people of the nations to find security and peace. You know, there's this past week, something else very exciting that happened is there were four new elements isolated and named for the periodic table. Now, the names are, as I understand, are still transitional. They haven't been officially voted on or whatever, but they're just preliminary. But the one was developed in a town outside of Moscow, and it is called a Moscovium, I believe is what they're calling it right now. And then there's another one that was isolated in Japan, and is that being calling Nihonian? Because in Japanese, is it Nippon is Japanese for Japan, so I assume that's where that's coming from, or perhaps it's referencing Nihao. Either way, and then there are two other ones. There's one that was named after an Armenian scientist. And then there's one that was isolated in Tennessee, and they're calling that one is it Tennessine or Tennessine? It's very, very exciting, and it's unprecedented to have four at one time. Four at one time, but all of this is a collaboration between scientists from all over the world, because none of these scientists in any of these places could do any of it without any of the rest of them. Science only advances through the sharing of ideas and the exchange of ideas, and so that's very exciting and very encouraging to see. So then I watched this other clip on Reuters. Evidently there are, I don't know if you heard about this, but there's like riots going on in Venezuela over food. Now, Venezuela is a longtime socialist country, and people of the United States would do well to really pay attention to this, because what's happening, there's huge food lines. It's like Soviet Russia in the food lines, and there's all of a sudden, I guess they found somebody got a hold of a shipment of pasta, and the word got out that there was a shipment of pasta, and thousands of people made a rush on this location to get food, and a woman was even shot.
Santa Maria, ruega por nosotros pecadores, ahora y en la hora de nuestra muerte. Dios te salve María, llena eres de gracia, el Señor es contigo, Santa Madre de Dios. Dios te salve María, llena eres de gracia, el Señor es contigo, Santa Madre de Dios.
No, it snuck up on me there. But I mean, seriously, this desire to make sure everybody has the same, it doesn't work, and you end up it ends up that those in control still have more than everybody else. It's just that when all that's been done is that everybody's been reduced to the same level of scrounging, and that does nothing to further humanity. So say what you will about capitalism and about American people and capitalism, but really take a minute and look when you're touting socialism as a form of government. Take a look at these countries. Take a look at these countries that are socialist countries. Now, I'm not saying you can't socialize services, but there's a difference between socialized government and socialized service, right? So there are things that should be and or are identified as basic human rights, and those things should be available to all people. Think about it. Think about it. Then I heard that this past week the U.S. government has gifted an unprecedented bailout, financial bailout, to the Israeli government. This after all of the bizarre legislation that's been pushed through and the bizarre things that have been happening in Israeli government. The U.S. government is now it's like billions of dollars.
Okay then, Amazing Saints in the key of B.
You read my mind! Oh, when the saints come marching in, oh, when the saints come marching in, how I wish to be in that number. When the saints come marching in. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound. Amazing grace, how sweet the sound that saves a wretch like me. Amazing grace poured down on me. I once was lost, but now am found. I once was lost, but now I'm found. Was blind, but now I see. Amazing grace poured down on me.
'Twas grace that taught.
'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear. 'Twas grace that taught my heart to fear. And grace my fears relieved. Amazing grace she poured down on me. How precious did that grace appear. How precious did that grace appear. The hour I first believed. Amazing grace poured down on me. When we've been there, 10,000 years, 10,000 years. When we've been there, 10,000 1,000 years, bright shining as the sun. Amazing grace pour down on me. We've no less days, to sing God's praise, to sing God's praise. We've no less days to sing God's praise than when we first begun. Amazing grace for everyone. Saints come marching in. When the saints come marching in, how I wish to be in their number. When the saints come